Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I would like to call the District Advisory Building Committee meeting to order. Today is a Thursday, April 21, 2022, and we are meeting via Zoom. And I will take the role. Co-Chair Mark Diane.
Present.
Chair Emily Figdor.
Here.
Council April Fournier. School Board Member Otto Russell Better.
Here.
Members Matthew Winch.
I am here.
Abigail Fuller. Paula Stevens.
Here.
We want to mention that members Jessica Moreno and Jay Norris will not be able to join us. Also, member Sarah Thompson will join us later in the meeting. We also have district staff, CHA staff, and Herman staff. With that said, I will start with the approval of the meeting minutes from March 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Matthew, second.
Second.
All in favor, please. Any question or change the meeting minutes? I see none. Please indicate whether you support approving the meeting minutes with a show of your hand. The meeting minutes approved anonymously. Thank you. Please, if you have any question, raise your hand in the feature in Zoom, and so that we all get the opportunity to talk. And with that being said, I will turn over to the superintendent. Superintendent, please walk us through the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah. And Matthew, your hand is up. Was that a vote hand, or do you have a question?
No, it's just this iPad. Every time it sees my hand go up, it thinks I'm raising my hand.
Thank you.
That's what smart machines will do to you. Great. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. We have an important agenda. As you know, back in April when we last met, we had approved the delay claim and new work costs for Longfellow and Presumpscot, and we still had Reiche's claims outstanding, but there was work being done and we were approaching the point that we are now at, which is to have a final set of delay claims and new work costs that have been vetted and are going to be explained today so that we can hopefully make a recommendation to the school board on how to pay for those claims. So that's on the agenda. And then the other sort of development is that a couple of days after we finalized our approval for the Presumpscot and Longfellow claims, there were additional claims made by a couple of the subcontractors on the Presumpscot project. So those have now been reviewed and are also in front of us today to understand what they're for and to hopefully be able to also make a recommendation to the board regarding how to pay for that. So those are the main two, those are the two action items on the agenda, the recommendations for both the Reiche and the Presumpscot delay claims and new work costs. Then we'll also have a discussion about the impact of these recommendations, assuming that they're approved today, on the FF&E, the fixtures and furniture line item. And we'll have a brief update on the claims that are still outstanding which are primarily the soft costs for both the architect and the project management group, as well as some additional extensions that have some additional costs that are associated with the extended length of the project. So we'll just touch on those. And so that's our agenda for today. Two major action items that are then scheduled to be on the board's agenda on May 3rd. So with that, I'm turning it over, I believe, to CHA to walk us through, or Emily, I'm not 100% sure.
I'm going to share the screen, and I believe Jeff and Laura will lead us through the discussion.
Excellent, thank you.
With me. Okay, are you seeing the full screen view?
We are.
Yes? Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Jeff Birnbaum with CHA, and we'll proceed to the PowerPoint. If I don't see any hands, feel free to interrupt and ask any questions or points of clarifications. In the agenda package in the PowerPoint, we'll review the Reiche delay claim and new work cost summaries. We'll speak about the Presumpscot delay claim. And new works cost summaries have already been provided. We already discussed Longfellow and new works summary. These are slides that are in this agenda package. And then we'll talk about where it's going to be funded from. So let's go to the next slide, please. So starting off with Reiche, the initial claim was a narrative for the delay portion at $900,000 to $1 million. The new work, which was a rough order of magnitude, so it didn't have all the backup and it wasn't fully vetted yet. It was estimated around $225,000. We, of course, asked for additional backup and continued to ask for more information. So the revised delay claim came in at $824, but we were still missing information, and we still had a lot of open questions. The revised new work came in higher at $251,000 with sub backup. And then for the next round of discussions, the delay claim dropped to $820,000. And this is at the time that we actually had a meeting with Hardy Pond directly, and as well as the subcontractors to negotiate the delay claim. And then the new works came in and went up to $299,000 as they continue to vet all this new works scope of work from the permitting process. And it's currently standing at $304,000, and we believe to be that's a final number from Hardy Pond, having vetted everything out through all the applicable subs, and vetted out by the Harriman team as well. And a delay claim dropped from 820 through 700 to 719. This was through further negotiations and going back and forth with Hardy Pond, asking for substantiation of labor, substantiation of what are called general requirements and those items to complete the project. So we are now at $1,024,000 for the Reiche delay claim. And we have detail, if you would like to look at the detail as well, annexed in this slide deck, but this is a summary slide. And it's taken us about, 4.5, 5 months to get to this point with the delay claim with Reiche. They had a scheduling and a consultant, and we feel that at 719, it is substantiated. It is reasonable given the circumstances, and we've taken it to a good point, if you will, in a negotiation process. Next slide, please. So the Presumpscot delay claim, when we last presented it to you, was a day or two later that we found out that two subcontractors, one asking for about $100,000 and the other one asking for $106,000 for a total claim of $206 plus the GC markup was being claimed. It was a complete shock and blindside to us as we thought everything was final. We can certainly get into more detail. These claims are an unfortunate timing circumstance, but the claims are not as a result or any dollar or dime as a result of the time it took for them to come forward. But we have a timeline as to what occurred with the GC in this regards. If you recall, we had $30,000 allocated towards what we heard as from the electrician as potential costs associated with the delay, but we had no backup or information. And having gone through everything that we had gone through in the 2.5, 3 months prior, I felt when we put that number in, that would have been more than sufficient. That was not the case whatsoever. So we met with Great Falls. We actually had an on-site meeting and we negotiated with the electrician and Warren Mechanical, who were the two subs, and Great Falls. We had some fairly in-depth conversations. And at the end of the day, we, including markup from Great Falls, which is at 10%, this claim is settled at $170,567. And below is what was previously authorized. There's no additional new works that has come to the table, and the actual delay claim portion from Great Falls' general conditions and general requirements remains at 95.8, which was previously approved and funded. Next slide, please. This is just a reminder of where we stand with Longfellow. There's been no additional claims put forward and no additional exposure being told to us or implied by Blaine Casey. And this was already approved and funded at the last board meeting. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of all three schools from initial claims through the progression and then the final claims for the delay portion, not for the new works. So the final delay claims came in at 1448. From the last round, 558 was funded per your recommendation to the school board and voted in by the school board. And we're looking at $890,000 today for your discussion and recommendation to be funded for the delay claim portion. Next slide, please. And the new work summary is an addition is $304,000. The total of the three was $540. $235 was previously recommended and approved by the board and funded. So we are looking for the Reiche portion, 304, to be funded. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the claims that were previously funded. I think we kind of just went through this. Okay. Summary of claims yet to be funded. So Reiche, 1.024, which includes the new works and the delay claims, and the Presumpscot, 170 additional delay claim. The total amount is 1.194826. New work claims yet to be funded, 304. Is that 304 should be in that 1194? Is that correct, Emily?
The total is adds up to the 1.1.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So the total is 1194. It's just broken out a different way. 304 for new works and 890 for delay claims. Okay. Thank you. So 1194 is the number that we're speaking of in terms of discussion today and the funding as to where it would come from. Why don't I start from there before we get into the funding component and open the room to questions, points of clarification.
Any questions? I see one hand. Mark Diane. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to have some clarification as to the 170 that came out of Presumpscot.
Clarification. So
because aren't you surprised by that number arriving on our table?
We were completely blindsided and shocked when it happened a day or two after we had met and represented that the delay claim overall was final. And from a bird's eye view, here's what happened. There was a schedule that was published by the general contractor that was then published to the subcontractors. We were informed that that schedule was put forth in collaboration and coordination with the subcontractors. Later in February, we were told that there were no claims that were to be expected. We later found out that, at least from the electrical sub, they hadn't seen that updated schedule until February. I'll give you the exact date. February, excuse me. It was sent to them on February 2nd. They couldn't open it. They wrote back to the sub on the 14th of February, and they were able to open it on the 18th. At that time, they recognized the schedule as it was set forth, which included an overlap of work this summer for the renovation and the new build. They put forth an overtime claim and some small amount of additional work for $102,000. And that actual backup came about after our DABC meeting last month. We were totally shocked. We also then got the claim from Warren Mechanical, coincidentally, for $106,000, and it wasn't presented as such as any type of overlap work, but rather just a day for day claim because of the date from the date that the work was supposed to start and to when the permit was issued. So we pushed back to the electrician fairly hard in our negotiation with them over about an hour and a half face to face. And they removed about $4,000 worth of charges associated with engineering and project management. But they held pretty firm. They held firmly on the OT that they needed. So we ultimately decided that we didn't want to further expose the project to any additional costs. So we agreed with them with their delay claim as they had presented it, less those two other items that I mentioned that they deducted as a lump sum number. And with them and Great Falls, they are obligated to deliver the project. With Warren Mechanical, they dropped their delay claim in half, from $106,000 to $58,000. We just basically went to them and outright rejected their claim based upon a day for day, and we settled with them at 58 because there is some overlapping work as well. So already, Great Falls says there's no other claims that are being put forth associated with the delay, that they spoke with all the subs. So this is what transpired.
Thanks. Could you expand on what you mean when you say a day-to-day claim?
Yes. So the agreement speaks to the schedule starting at the date that the agreement is signed, or as of a date that is agreed to for start of work. So we had an 87-day delay from when the contract was signed and or work was to be started, to when the actual permit was issued. So they basically tried to claim 87 days of lost productivity as a result of not being on site in accordance to the original schedule that was set forth. And we outright rejected that claim. In the manner by which it was submitted.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. We have Stephen. Paul Stephen, please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Jeff. Can you characterize for me, how much of, and not in actual numbers, but in generalities, as to how much of these delay claims are involved with general conditions versus how much of them are involved with potentially increased material costs because of delays, versus what is additional work? Those three items.
The additional work is broken out as defined as new work claims.
Okay, so that's the $304,000 of new work.
That's correct, as well as what is reflected on the summary for the other schools. That's new work. And that's actual scope of work.
And how was that a scope of work occasioned? Is it because of requirements from the city, errors in, or not errors in emissions, but unclarity on the documents, or where do those numbers come from?
The scope of work is not owner driven. It is driven as a direct result of the permitting process.
Yeah. Okay.
And interpretation of the code and city reviewers making comments, thereby costing the project money.
Okay, I remember all of those discussions, and then so I'm assuming a great chunk of this is general conditions.
A good majority of the claim is general conditions. We have 4 months of, for each school, 4 months of an extended schedule. So it's 4 months of the superintendent, project manager, assistant project manager, project executive. That's people's salaries. We also have general conditions for Reiche as it relates to the overlapping work this summer. They felt strongly that additional superintendent was needed because of the amount of work in many differing locations. And we agreed that another further support was needed, but not necessarily a full-time superintendent. We tried to work with them and provide them solutions, saying, well, if we have a project executive and a project manager who's already on the project full-time, why can't they be on site? But there are a lot of other considerations in regard. So we ultimately agreed with that superintendent for the 2.5-3 month period this summer. So that was the general conditions. General requirements are those costs during that 4 months that would be incurred for them to do their job, the tools, the Connex storage trailers. We have winter conditions that were in there for the work that occurred through this winter because they weren't, foundation work wasn't originally intended to be done during the winter. So that is a cost to the project, reasonable, and that's all backed up. Fencing and those items. As far as escalation, it's a fairly minimal amount. We really pushed back on escalation as a claim. Our position is that these projects were occurring over a period of time anyways. And so we are not responsible just because there's a delay and there was an issue with a permit does not necessarily mean or equate to the fact that we are responsible for an escalated amount, because if it weren't for the permit delay, they would still have escalation and it wouldn't be our problem. So we ended up negotiating with a few of the subs in that regards. The Reiche sub, for example, had escalation for copper wiring. And so with his delay claim and the escalation, we were able to negotiate with him. We had escalation claims within the Warren Mechanical claim, both for Longfellow and Great Falls, and with Warren Mechanical's help, of course, they were able to mitigate that, I think, by at least 50, 60%. And the rest we pushed back on. And just so that you're aware, we just got an email, Laura, was it last week? It was, because today's Tuesday. What's today? When?
Well, Thursday.
Thursday.
Yep.
It could have been Monday, but they basically came to us and put us on notice that the roofer went to them and said, due to escalation costs, we are informing you that there's going to be an increased cost in roofing. And so Great Falls was informing us, and my response was very simple. This is a lump sum closed book agreement, and just because there's escalation, I don't see how this is an owner issue. We will deal with it as we need to deal with it. It's not part of this delay claim or new works, but this stuff is real. The market is volatile, and I think to an extent, we told the subs we recognize the challenges that are put forth, but that doesn't mean it all goes to the owner.
Okay, thanks. I certainly am very well aware of what's happening in the roofing market in particular lately. And you're absolutely right to say, hey, you guys bought it, live with it. So would you characterize the relationships with these three contractors as adversarial at this point in time, Jeff? Because it sounds like you guys have pushed back pretty hard on stuff. And I'm just wondering if everybody's kind of happy at this point in time.
Very good question. We were very sensitive, mindful, conscientious, and professional in this negotiation. And the premise has always been that we want to be fair and reasonable, but we need to be able to substantiate the dollars with the appropriate backup. Giving us a narrative that something's going to cost $900,000 just doesn't pass the sniff test. It's not appropriate. So over the period of time, they were able to provide us that backup. At the end of the day, for all three contractors, we were very clear that we want to focus on building these projects for the children, that we want to focus on the construction, that we wanted to get over this hump, that we weren't here to nickel and dime them, and we weren't here to just beat them up just because, but rather it was to make sure that to answer to the community, to answer to everybody, that these were fair, reasonable, and defensible delay claims across the board. And so there is, I do not believe there is any adversarial position or feeling on behalf of these subs. It certainly wasn't easy. It wasn't pleasant. No one likes to have these conversations, but everybody kept their mind. Everyone was above board and ready to move forward.
Thanks, Jeff. Those are great answers, and I really appreciate your bearing down on this thing the way you have.
Thank you, Paul. Member Aura, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, I just had a couple of clarifying questions. One about the total claims for Presumpscot, just so I'm really clear, that is the bulk of that all for overtime costs?
That the 100 and so take 10% off of that is the fee for Great Falls. So between warm, mechanical, and electrician, yes, the bulk of it is overtime.
Okay. And then I needed a little further explanation about overlap costs. So does that mean when the different subs are there at the site at the same time, and how does that add some kind of cost? Like, can you just explain what that means, the overlap?
Yes, good question. The original Presumpscot schedule, the schedule by which the subcontractors bid the project and base their numbers upon, showed the new addition being done at a different time than a renovation. So it was new addition, then renovation. Now we are doing new addition and renovation at the same time. So in order for them to do that, they have to bring in more resources, more bodies. In addition to that, they need to work overtime because before they had X number of days or months to complete a certain portion of scope. Now it's all being compressed essentially for the renovation in 2.5 months this summer. It's going to be quite intensive. So, and then we have the remaining 4 months of the year to complete the addition. That's what I mean by overlap.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Aura. Any other questions? I see a text by Emily. It says adding up the final delay claims and the final new work claims, but not including soft costs. The total is 1.99 million.
Do we have that on the slide, Emily?
I don't think so. So just in case it's helpful for people to,
okay.
To add up the final numbers that you've just presented, Jeff.
Okay.
All right.
And
yeah, go ahead.
All right. So but for today, we're speaking of the 1194 to be funded.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So the next step is, if there's no other questions, and by the way, if you think of any other questions, by all means, feel free. The next step is to discuss where it's coming from, with a recommendation as to where it should be coming from. So Emily, next slide. Oh, look at that. Perfect. All right.
This is just a summary for reference. I don't know if we need to go through it.
This is okay.
Sorry, did you want to speak to it?
It's just intended to remind folks what's already been, what was already approved previously and where the funding for that came from. And you can see that at the bottom of the slide, that where the funding for that came from. So basically from the
all right, and that's for the other, yes, okay, great. So this is available sources of funding for purposes of the 1.2, correct? So there's $187,000 left associated with Lyseth. We weren't around for that, so I really can't speak to that, but I know Harriman is in tune with these numbers. Total budget for the FF&E for the 3 schools is 2.236. Amount remaining into construction and contingency for all 3 schools is 1.3. So total funding available was 3.7. Next slide. Okay, so the path forward is, the recommendation is to utilize the 187 that remains from Lyseth and $837,000 from the FF&E budget. This is for Reiche only at the moment. So the total amount for Reiche is 1.024, and those are the funds that is remaining, but the recommendation is to pull 837 from the FF&E budget. we'll go through this and then I'm sure there'll be questions. Next slide.
There's
Before you
Superintendent Blue goes.
Just, I think because it's germane to both this recommendation and the next one. Can you talk about why we're suggesting that this come from FF&E versus from the contingency for the 3 projects?
Certainly. I'll discuss the contingency portion first, and then I'll try for the FF&E. We are at a point in the construction projects where we still have unknowns, and the contingencies we don't feel are super overly inflated. Where at this point in time, where we are at in construction, it would make sense to pull from the actual contingency. So we collectively as a group discussed where the funding can come from, and based upon the amount of the furniture that was expended for Lyseth and comparing it to the furniture that is expected to be expended for these other 3 schools, Harriman felt, taking into consideration escalation and what have you, that it would be okay to pull from the FF&E budget and still have enough funds left over to still provide FF&E. And that is in taking into consideration what the costs were for FF&E for Lyseth, which came in, as I understand, fairly under budget, like 30% or 26% under budget.
Can you
Now,
talk a little bit about just the contingency? When you say that it's not, like how much money is, I know it says 1.3 million is left in the contingency, but that's out of what was the starting contingency, and at what point would you feel that we are no longer in a phase where you could have unknowns that could potentially draw that from?
So Longfellow's contingency that is remaining, I'm going off the top of my head, I don't know if we have a slide for this, is around $120,000, and we have 2 years worth of work left, and we feel that is low, and we shouldn't go anywhere near that, given the scope of work and the complexity of the phases and the logistics over the next 2 years for Longfellow. Presumpscot has around $425,000 left over. The new build portion is not complicated. We don't feel that the new build portion is going to have much unknowns. But the renovation portion for Presumpscot, and when you get into a renovation, you run into situations where you end up tapping into contingency. We will know come September, maybe at the beginning of October, but come September, where we relatively stand in terms of the renovation of Presumpscot, because we're going to be done with the renovation work. There may be some punch and some small ancillary items. At that point in time, we're going to have about 3.5 months left for the new build. But we'll be in a position probably by November to really relook at Presumpscot's contingency and say, we feel comfortable you can pull 50%, 60%, whatever that number may be, and reallocate it back into FF&E. Reiche's contingency, I think, is hovering around 470, 500, and it's similar to Longfellow. And the general contractor hasn't necessarily been so stellar that we can say, let's pull from that contingency now. Plus, there are other logistical and renovation issues that would come about that we would need to tap into that contingency. And we are also way out in terms of completion. So our best case, our nearest future of what contingency we can tap into would be Presumpscot. If that answers, that answer that question?
That did for me. That was really helpful. So thank you.
All right, I have seen a hand. Paul, go ahead, please, Paul.
Yeah, I'm just, and maybe this is a question for Emily more than you, Jeff, but I don't know. I'm seeing so much escalation across the board in all aspects of construction, and I just am questioning the removal of funding from FF&E, because I'm not sure what's happening in terms of cost escalation in that regard. And can you comment on that, Emily?
I can.
Or maybe you can, Jeff. So
yeah, I'll comment on escalation in general. I can't get into specifics with respect to the FF&E procurement and designers and where it's coming from. I do know from our discussions that we took into account escalation in terms of what it would take for them to purchase an appropriate amount of FF&E for the remaining 3 schools. Obviously, there is concern, and looking at pulling $837,000 just at face value is concerning. With respect to escalation itself, you are absolutely correct. Raw materials are going up. Importing and what's going on internationally is going up. I think there's going to be a challenge, even though I believe it's doable and manageable, to be able to find furniture that will fit within the remaining budget for these schools. Because we're not going to go into like designer furnitures or, high rub count type of fabrics or anything else like that. Like we know lumber went up for a little while and now it's back down. Drywall, I don't know if you heard about this, is going up on May 2nd by, I'm hearing 50%. That's what's been published by the USG. So, but our furniture is not drywall. But it's market volatility, and this is why superintendent's question to me was relevant, because we're going to do everything within our capability to minimize tapping into the Presumpscot contingency. I'm not saying that's a guarantee. I'm saying we will hold a contractor accountable for what their deliverables are pursuant to the project that they bought out and the scope, and be hopeful that we will have Presumpscot contingency left over to refund the FF&E budget, because we're not ordering the FF&E for not all the FF&E for Longfellow and Longfellow and Reiche until after Presumpscot's going to be done at the end of this year.
Right. Okay, I'm interested to hear what Mark has to say.
Yeah, Paul, just as I can understand your comment a little, or your question, are you asking if we're seeing escalation or worried about escalation on the furniture?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm wondering what you guys are seeing, and I personally haven't participated in understanding or knowing what's going on in terms of and what we've bid out recently in our office. I'm just curious as to what you guys are seeing in terms of escalation, in terms of FF&E.
Yeah, it also is subject to a lot of the same escalation factors, with raw material costs going up, and production cost, transportation cost, all impact that. I think what we're attempting to do is figure out the strategy by which we don't get caught still in construction and expending all of the contingency for construction, and then we're at a point where there is no recourse to find funding for changes that are unforeseen conditions that arise during construction. And so the strategy has been, in looking at the model that we use for Lyseth, let's look to see how much we can accomplish with a furniture budget to address the critical needs. And it's going to be like everything else. We've got a set number with the BFOF, but we're going to do everything we can to prioritize and look at an equitable lens to address the furniture for the remaining 3 schools.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm definitely supportive of preserving the contingencies, given the climate that we've got right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Paul. Next will be Laura. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. This might be for Mark as well, because I'm trying to just remember. I know the thinking about cutting the FFE budget by 37% has something to do with the LISA, but Mark, could you just remind me, is that about how much less LISA ended up being? I remember we talked about that number, but just what was the reduction, or what was the amount that was used as a percentage of what was allocated for LISA?
Yeah, I think they. Yeah, go ahead, Emily, please, with citing the number.
Well, it was 44% that we spent of LISA's budget.
Okay, because I guess some of my concern is starting out with that, and then we end up even, having less to work with. That's concerning to me. I guess I'm thinking about what Jeff said about the potential of the contingency from Presumpscot. Was that about 400,000, Jeff? Was that right? If that was able to be used, was that?
Yeah, look, it's over 400 today.
Okay.
It is expected that contingency will be tapped into for unknown unknowns that are going to come up during the renovation this summer. Whether that's 75,000, 30,000, or 300,000, we don't know.
Okay. Because, so it might be a very small amount of that left, but
correct.
I appreciate that idea of being able to then use that to go back into the FF&E. But I just, I think, I don't know how much we're going to get all of this tonight, but I really feel like it's hard for me to get behind a plan like this without feeling more clear about what each building's expectations are for the FF&E, because I know they're different for each, and what is that going to look like concretely for, if 40% is cut out. Like, I feel like that's hard for me to wrap my head around what each of these buildings might be losing. So I don't know what detail we're going to get into, but I just think some of that context would be helpful in making a decision tonight about how much we're going to have in that. How much, 38% reduction is a good chunk, and I don't know what that might mean for each building.
Yeah. We will have a slide later dealing with some of the strategy around FF&E, but it will not get into the level of detail that you're looking at, Aura.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Aura. Matthew, you're next. Go ahead, please. You are muted.
Trying to get unmuted. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just thinking about FF&E. Does it make sense? I know there's talk about staging the FF&E purchases, but does it make sense to secure it now and work with the manufacturer to have it the price guaranteed, but to have the deliveries staggered in a manner that doesn't force Portland Public Schools to have to warehouse a bunch of stuff? And then you get this big unknown known sooner, rather than waiting till someday down the road when furniture is bought out in I don't know however many chunks it'll take. But I just wonder if there's some logical rationale to packaging it all as one.
Yeah, I think Matt, our goal is to try to be as efficient as possible, certainly with purchasing the furniture. At the same time, we're also looking at when new spaces get turned over and making sure that we have furniture to outfit spaces that didn't have furniture to begin with. And so that's one consideration. The other one is to balance that against when we have a clearer picture, to Jeff's point earlier, a clearer picture of when we'll have some certainty on the contingency expenses. And so certainly as Presumpscot gets closer to through the interior renovation work, we'll have a better handle of how much is the potential remainder from that we feel some certainty in being able to use for FF&E.
All right. Thank you so much, Matthew. Any other questions before we go to the next part? I see none. Go ahead. Jeff, you can go ahead, or Mark.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And the 170,000 for Presumpscot, we are also recommending to take that from the FF&E budget. So 7.6% reduction. The impact to the FF&E is, so total budget for the three schools, $2.236 million. A reduction recommendation to fund the delay claims for Reiche and 170 for Presumpscot leaves you with $1.228 million left for FF&E for all three schools.
Okay,
55% for reference.
I see member Aura also has a question. Go ahead, Omar.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I just feel uncomfortable with some schools having more of a reduction than others. I wonder, is there a way to just say that we're gonna, I was thinking it was, I was misunderstanding that first number that was specifically for Reiche. I was thinking it was for all the schools, but I just feel uncomfortable with saying that, one school is only gonna get a small percentage reduction. That's not what's happening.
We're not doing that, Laura.
Okay, what is that? What did that last slide was saying? 7% reduction.
The percentage reduction is just the cost. So it's just of the total pool that we have for all the FF&E. It's a 7% reduction to cover the Presumpscot cost.
Or
But it's not taking from Presumpscot's pot. It's taking from the whole pot.
Throughout the entire projects, we've been trying to work to rebuild each of all of the schools with a collective pot of money, and that is not changing here.
I was just misunderstanding the percentage being of the impact and not of the. So okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Aura. Mark Diane, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. I don't disagree with the rationale, I guess, of taking monies from FFE to stabilize the constraints we have because of delay claims and reserve money in the current construction fund for the unknowns. But I kind of share Board Member Better's concern about the FFE. To me, it feels like a curtain, and I'm not sure what's behind the curtain. If there's a reduction in that amount, and then there's a commitment by either the school board or this body to reapportion the money proportionally, I guess that works. I'll be honest, I share an assumption that the FFE prospectus for spending is different with each school. Some might need furniture, some might need certain equipment. I'm not on the school board, so I don't know what those conversations look like. So I think I can recommend that they draw down on the FFE budget in order to do what we need to do to move forward as a financial exercise. But I do share concern as to what this means for the board when they look at this reduction. I mean, if the reduction is an aggregate experience, the whole pot of money will be reduced, then I would be curious as a board member, what does it mean for the individualized plan for each school? And I don't have that information. I'm not sure it's inside my purse to make that decision, but I share the concerns of the board taking a look at FFE as a reduction. As a consequence of saving the construction, we reduce the FFE in the hopes that we can replenish it if our concerns around unknown construction expenditures don't become realized. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I hope it does to me. I'm really uncomfortable because I don't prospectus for the spending allocations are for the FFE. I mean, if we build a new school and there's not enough money to put chairs in the classroom, we're done. You know, if staff was expecting certain equipment in their schools as teaching aids and it doesn't happen, what does that mean for parents? Parents tend to focus on real tangible, immediate things in a school as opposed to what the plumbing problems were getting the school to open. So I'm just throwing that out as an observation. But I could see where some board members might have some concerns because to me, FFE is the meat and potatoes of a new school. And if we reduce that, people are going to have questions. And whether it was an equitable reduction across the schools themselves is a separate question as well, but an important one. So I just wanted to make that observation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark Diane. Emily, you're next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to respond to Councillor Dion and just make clear, you know, this is a trade-off that we're put in a position that we essentially have to make. We have lost $2 million out of the total budget for the BFOF projects as a result of the delays and the new work claims. So we have to find the money somewhere. We're up against a wall. We don't have other options. So unless we want to raid the contingency when we have a lot of unknowns facing us in renovating old buildings and working with general contractors that haven't necessarily, that we know we may face additional challenging issues with. This is it. So yes, this is absolutely far less than ideal, but we don't have another option, and we have to approve this money in order to enable the projects to move forward. And then we live to fight another day on working to ensure that we get all or as much of the FFE that is needed for all three schools. And so I don't see another way around this, and it's frustrating and it's hard that we're in this place. But this is the situation we face right now. The good news is we still do have the money right now to see these projects through. The alternative is that we try to locate additional money for the projects, which is, opening a huge other can of worms. And so I think this is the best route forward. And I'll just say, with respect to the FFE, as I said in response to Ms. Russell-Batter's question earlier, we are not playing one project off of another. We are trying to meet the needs of all of the projects, and we'll continue to do so. And so, our goal is to ensure that the schools all have the FFE that they need. But we can't put furniture in schools until they're actually renovated.
Can I respond, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
I don't disagree with anything you've had to say, Chair Figdor. I was just trying to validate that it's a legitimate concern. I would think the parents or other board members on the school board that they're going to feel we're raiding the FFE. It's a hard decision. It has to be made. It's the appropriate decision. But I just wanted to validate what Laura had to say, because it's a real concern, and we'll have to deal with it at the end of this cycle when you have a better understanding what is actually left behind as available funds to replenish the FFE. But I just felt the need to at least express that we considered that. But that doesn't dissuade me from making a decision that appears pretty evident that has to be made. So thanks.
Thank you, Council Diane. Member Stephen, you're next, please. Oh, you are muted.
I agree with both Emily and Mark. I don't think we've got much other choice in all of this. I think it's a little distressing to me, and I don't know how soon we ought to be thinking about going back to finding additional sources of money. But it may not be too soon to be thinking about how do we do that, because I think I am still concerned that our contingencies may be a little low going forward. Given what we've seen so far, I'm concerned about that. And so, I mean, I think to the extent of when we're facing kids sitting on the floor, what are our opportunities for additional funding? And that does concern me considerably here. But I don't think we have any other choice right now except to spend the money that we have available to us within the budget.
Thank you, Member Paul. Next will be Member Matthew Winch. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess I would just reiterate that given, in light of all these past three comments, that it does make a lot of sense to start building lists for furnitures, fixtures, and equipment sooner rather than later. Begin understanding now what the needs are for these three remaining schools. You don't need a finished classroom to know what you're going to put in it. You need somebody to help guide teachers through, or administrative staff through, what it is that they need for each particular room that they're occupying. And I'm sure you can come up with a list of furniture, equipment, and other items that are going to be appropriate for those classrooms inside a fairly decent margin of error. And if you can understand that sooner, then you have more time to address, as Paul Stevens pointed out, a potential need for additional funds. I think it's frankly foolish not to begin working on furniture budgets now.
All right. Thank you so much. Member Otto Russell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. That makes a lot of sense, what Matthew just said. And I just wanted to ask for a little help with the time frame. I know, I think it was you, Jeff, that was explaining what it would look like with the contingency for Presumpscot, like as the first example. And then I just want to try to understand the timing of finding out where we're at for contingencies and the timing for ordering the FFE, like kind of how that might look, to like have us understand how that would play out to potentially have more resources left. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to
It does.
wrap my head around the three projects and kind of what does the timing of all of that look like?
We have a December 2023 completion for Reiche and Longfellow.
Oh, right, the same. Okay.
Can you hang on a second? We actually have a slide next
okay.
that deals with that issue. So let's do that. But, maybe, I don't know if it's before or during that. I think if Mark, if you could talk a little bit about where we are in the procurement process for the FF&E as well, just so that
and my question can be put off, Javier, if it's going to come up in a slide.
No, it's coming. It's the next slide. So I think that we should just move into that, given where this conversation is right now.
Okay.
I think it makes sense for us to move to that next slide, Emily. And then also as part of that discussion, just if you could, Mark, talk about where we are in the actual procurement, sort of in response to, to Matthew's recommendation, which I think is very sound. But I also know that there is work that, that is ongoing. So just if you could fill us in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this slide does a couple things. So that there's also remember that the furniture isn't just the desks and chairs and other aspects of that. There's also instructional technology. Some of that instructional technology is already in the process of procurement, and so it's stuff like the instructional monitors that we put on the walls, for instance, in Reiche, and so some of it, and there's also other infrastructure of switches for the networks and whatnot. Some of that's ongoing. We're already also beginning the process of the evaluation of what we need furniture too. One model, and it's not the only model, but one model looks at equity as we did with Lyseth. With Lyseth, we had a certain budget. We didn't buy new furniture for the entire school. Most of the classrooms, again, all have furniture. Some furniture is more distressed than others, and so we work with each individual school to understand their priorities. The priorities for Lyseth ended up being we did the administration area, and so that was a new construction on the front of the building, and there were some new spaces there that didn't exist before, but there were also other spaces that had previously existed. So we looked at inventorying what we needed in those spaces. We also we had some additional pre-kindergarten spaces, but we identified that the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten wing got new furniture at Lyseth. So that was all new furniture there. The library was a new library space. We invested new furniture for the library and to really work with the new space and the new layout of it. So we're right now considering a similar model, but we're working with each individual school to see if that is the right model for each of them. So the process is started. We already have a sense of what the budget would be if we applied the Lyseth model for each of the three schools. And so that's ongoing. But what this slide identifies is that there's some of the completion dates of some of these spaces. So the admin addition for Reiche is at the middle of this summer right now. And that consists of primarily there's a conference room and the office area. And so there already is existing furniture for those spaces because they exist now. We're just moving them to the right locations in the building. So it's not like when we open in the fall, we will be lacking furniture for those spaces. But that's the first in this list of completion dates. The next area is that the pre-K and K wing is already underway, the renovation of that on the first floor of Reiche, and that's scheduled for completion at the end of the summer too. And then the library and gathering area is also scheduled to be completed this summer. And so that's also an area that currently has furniture, but again, these are spaces that will be turned over. The Presumpscot, the new wing, is, as Jeff mentioned, I think already, that is anticipated to be complete December of 2022. That has new pre-K classrooms that will need furniture. It has admin spaces that are different and than their current configuration. So there's a likelihood of looking at additional furniture for the admin area for Presumpscot. And then the art music rooms, right now it's a shared space. So that is going to be a priority to get furniture for art and music. And then the cafeteria, currently there are tables that we use in the gym for Presumpscot. So, but that's, those are spaces that we're likely to look at carefully. And then for Longfellow, the addition is scheduled for completion. The rear addition is August 2023. And the admin, we're calling it admin addition, it's really admin reconfiguration at Longfellow. And that's scheduled for completion at the end of this summer as well. That admin reconfiguration inside of Longfellow, again, all those spaces currently have furniture, but we'll evaluate those needs relative to the rest of the school and needs for new furniture. But the rear addition has new spaces that will need new furniture.
Thank you, Mark. Chair Figdor has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. I just had one quick question. Having had the incredible pleasure of being in the first set of Reiche classrooms that have been completed, and knowing that there are, there are completed classrooms being completed at Longfellow as well now. Is it possible to have like a first tranche of classroom furniture, or would that not use economies of scale? And I know we have old furniture in there, and it's fine for the time being. So it's not, it's not necessary. It's just a question of since the new parts of the building are already being used, is that an opportunity to start to provide the furniture for those spaces?
Yeah, Emily, I think there's a couple items in thinking about when the right time is. It sort of goes back to what Matt was talking about, the idea that this right now with cost escalation, timing, the sooner you can procure materials or furniture, the lower the cost. They're not going down; they're only going up in the future. So the sooner the better. But we're weighing that against trying to be able to evaluate what we have available for funds to be able to prioritize across all of the schools. To your earlier point, really understanding what is the budget available for all of them. So I think all of those factors come into play in thinking about when the right time. We did at LICES, we separated the purchase of the furniture into two different furniture packages. There wasn't any significant premium. They truck it up from the factories, and so that transportation cost, there's some economies by grouping together, but largely the quantities that we're purchasing, there's not a lot of economy to be gained by putting it all in one, because there's a limitation in terms of how much you can fit into a transportation container or truck.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair Figdor. Anybody has a question? Yeah, go ahead, Mark or Chair.
Okay. So what's the next slide?
We actually need to go back to take the action that we need on both the Reiche and Presumpscot claim.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion if it's appropriate now. And maybe I can make, Mr. Superintendent, could I make both motions at once, or would you like to do them separately?
I think it would be helpful if we did them separately. Not that I think that the outcome is going to be any different. I just think that, for the ease of the, of notes of the meeting minutes and so on, that it'd just be easier if we had, a motion, a second, a vote, a motion, a second, and a vote for both of those.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make the motion for Reiche to recommend that the school board authorize the use of, as stated in the slide, $187,000 from the LICES project and $837,000 from the FFE budget to settle delay claims and pay for new work costs as a result of the permitting requirements at Reiche.
I'll second that motion.
All right. All in favor, please show your hand.
I think if you don't mind, if I'm trying to do a vote, because you have everybody on, we're like sharing the screen. You can't see everyone at the same time. So I think it'd be for purposes of the public record, everybody will be able to hear who voted which way.
So you want me to call the roll?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. All right. Co-chair Mark Diane?
Yes.
Chair Emily Figdor?
Yes.
School board member Otto Russell Butter?
Yes.
Member Matthew Wayne?
Yes.
Member Abigail Fuller,
Yes.
Member Paul Stephen.
Yes.
Yes for me. Any other? Am I missing anybody?
I think you've got everyone.
Okay. All right, that vote went anonymously. And now I think we can go ahead and the second motion.
Go on to the next slide, please, Emily.
If it's all right, I'll make this motion as well. And so the second motion is to recommend to the school board that we authorize the use of $170,000, roughly $170,000 as the detailed number in the slide from the FFE budget to settle the additional final delay claim brought on by permitting requirements at Presumpscot.
Second.
Thank you. The motion initiated Emily Figdor and second by Paul Stevens. Please indicate if you approve that. Co-chair Mark Diane,
Yes.
Chair Emily Figdor,
Yes.
School Board Otto Russell Butter,
Yes.
Member Matthew Wind,
Yes.
Member Abigail Fuller,
Yes.
Member Paul Stevens,
Yes.
and yes for me. The vote went anonymously. And
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Go on, Emily. You can take us forward a bit. So there are still, as you can see, a handful of claims that have not been settled. These we discussed at the previous meeting. The first two, these are Harriman and CHA claims that we are still in the process of vetting. In addition to that, we were made aware by Harriman that we will look at the potential cost of extending the rental of portables at Longfellow and Reiche because of the extension of the project. So this, total of about $200,000 is also yet to be resolved. So we learned about these last week. Obviously, the portables we learned about last week. We knew about the clerk and the owner's rep, and so we are in discussions with Harriman and CHA about all of those. And we will, at some time in the near future, have an update on what disposition we're recommending for these claims. But nothing for today. But just wanted to make that visible to everyone.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Any comments on the yet to be disposed of claims? If not, here have the upcoming meetings. We have a board meeting on May 3rd. The BLAC, which is the Building Level Advisory Committee that is consolidated for all three schools, scheduled to meet a week from today. And they'll be basically reviewing all of the things that you've seen today and at the previous meeting. And then this group is scheduled for May 19th.
All right, I see Member Otto Russell has a question.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Superintendent, I just noticed that isn't there a Finance Committee meeting on the night of the BLAC? So I'm wondering, will you be able to still, what is that going to look like? Okay, so just maybe I'll hop off the finance. Okay, I just wasn't sure who else is usually, we haven't had one for a while.
I'm usually there, but I won't be
Okay,
because we're
understand.
doing the finance.
Okay, but we'll still have it and it'll
Yeah.
just be to catch everybody up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Or Chair Figdor, go ahead, please.
I just want to encourage us for the BLAC meeting that we try to consolidate the information and present it in a way that is accessible, since I don't believe we've had a BLAC meeting in a couple of months now, and so it's going to be a lot of information, I think, for members who haven't had the opportunity to hear all of the developments. So I don't think we could use this same presentation, so perhaps we can, but I think let's put some thought into that, since it has been a long time since the BLAC has heard all of the different developments, and I just want to make sure that the information is accessible.
Thank you, Chair Figdor. Any other question, discussion? I think we're ready to adjourn. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? Or Member Aura, Chair Figdor second. All in favor, please indicate your show of hand. All right. We are adjourning at 7:36. And as Superintendent mentioned, our upcoming meeting, DABC meeting is going to be May 19 at 6 p.m. And so BLAC meeting will be April 28 at 6 p.m. Thank you so much. We did a lot of work tonight, and I really appreciate the time we spent here. And have a good
Thank
night.
you, everyone.
Thank
Night.
you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.